Hi, welcome to another Level Up. In this one we're going to take the chords of C, F and G7 and we're going to add a kind of boogie woogie rhythm and blues pattern underneath them. Now you can either do this on your own, as I just did, filling in the chords in between, or you can do it when someone else is strumming the chords and you don't have to worry about strumming the chords, you can just play that single note line. On top of that, I'm going to show you the pattern on all three of those chords, but if you want to, you can just learn the pattern on, say, the C chord and then revert to strumming on the F chord and the G7 chord all the time, or at least until you've managed to learn the one to go on the F chord and then use those two, and then the one to go on the G7 chord and do that and build it up a little bit at a time. So what we're trying to do is emulate the kind of thing you would hear either from the left hand of a piano or from a bass guitar or a double bass or maybe a guitar in that kind of boogie woogie rhythm and blues context, this kind of thing. Okay, so let's have a look. We'll put the tablature on the screen and I'll show you the pattern for the C riff. We're going to call this the C riff because it's over the C chord, and a little riff is kind of a little pattern that repeats over a chord, and then maybe when the chord changes we switch to a different riff. Here's our C riff. We start off with the open C string. Then we're going to use our second finger to play the third fret of the C string. Now this is quite important because what we want to do is slide from the third to the fourth, and if we do that with our second finger, then our first finger is free to play the next note. As with all of these things, particularly with tablature, it's easy to get your fingers in knots if you don't think carefully and look ahead as to what fingering is going to work. So, open C string, then the third fret of the C string with our second finger, and slide it up to the fourth. Now, you didn't hear much then because I was doing it very slowly and I talked a bit, so I'll do it a bit faster. There you go. Now, when I slide up to the fourth fret, I'm not plucking the string again. I'm keeping my finger down and just moving it quickly from the third to the fourth fret, and you should hear the sound carry on. So get that bit first of all. Open, pluck that one, third fret, pluck that one, and slide to the fourth. Okay. Now our first finger is free to play the third fret of the E string. And then we're going to use our ring finger to play the fifth fret of the E string. And then our first finger is going to hop across and play the third fret again, but this time of my first string, the A string. So we have this. And that's our little ascending pattern. We're going to come back down again with a little bit of a twist in it, but those are the notes we're going to be using. So once you're comfortable playing open, 3 to 4 on the C string, 3, 5 on the E string, and 3 on the A string, you're going to have all the notes you need. So once we've got to the top, to the third fret of the A string, we start coming down again. That's the fifth fret of the second string, the E string, with my ring finger. The third fret of that same string with my index finger. But instead of doing this bit backwards, we kind of do it forwards again. My second finger hits the third fret of the C string like it did before, slides up to the fourth. My index finger can come in and play the third fret of the second string. So we have, and then we're back to our open C string to start the whole thing again. Okay, here's a close-up. Really slowly. Now once you've got those notes, the most important thing about this is the timing of it. That's what gives it its groove and its drive. So get comfortable with the notes, almost like you're learning a scale. And get that slide, get used to doing that. When that's really fixed in your mind, the best way to get the rhythm, as with all music you're going to play on the ukulele, if you're playing single note lines like this, sing it. If you can't sing it, either out loud or to yourself in your head, you're going to have a hard job of playing it, because singing it kind of proves you've got it in there. I'm going to sing it along with the rhythm. Dum, ba-dum, ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-dum, 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 bum, 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 ba-dum, ba-bum, ba-dum, ba-bum, bum, 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 ba-dum, ba-bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-dum, ba-bum. And just do that on that C chord for as long as you need to. Tapping your foot, or if you've got somebody in the house or somebody you can meet up with who can strum a C chord for you, and you can keep that going, and you do this bit. Now at the beginning, I played the C chord as well, like this. I just played it on the first beat of the bar instead of that C note on its own. And if I was playing without someone accompanying me, strumming along with the chords, that would help fill the sound out. So I boom, that's my first note of the riff, but instead of, I'm doing the whole chord. When you're comfortable with that, let's learn a very similar riff on an F chord. Now we're going to do it with just a simple 2-finger F. If we can manage to just strum 3 strings and avoid strumming the A string, that'll help bring out this riff, because the first note of it is the note our index finger is holding down. But if you're struggling with that, if you still hit that full F at the beginning, it's still going to work. So what we're after here is F, you see how it's almost the same. We have this rhythm, bum, bum, ba, bum, 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 ba-dum, ba-dum. And on the F we have bum, ba-dum, ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-dum, bum. The only difference is the high note on this one. If it were exactly the same pattern shifted to F, it would be this. It'd go right up to that high F note there. I'm not doing that. I'm going to the 6th fret, and that's actually outlining this as an F7 chord, which is quite a nice effect. Even though the person strumming the chord behind you, if you're doing it with someone else, will be strumming an F, your riff has that one note that turns it into an F7. And making the F chord in a CF and G7 progression also a 7th is quite a common thing in blues, rhythm and blues, boogie woogie, things like that. It is a bluesy sound. So let's look at the F riff. First of all, our F. Now if we weren't playing the chord, the note we're after is the 1st fret of the E string. But we can, if we want to, add those other 2 strings and form an F chord there. We do exactly the same thing as before. Our 2nd finger is going to play a note and slide up. It's going to go from the 4th to the 5th fret of the 2nd string, the E string. Then our index finger, just like before, is free to come down, and it's going to come down on the 3rd fret of the A string. So we get this. The next note, I'm going to use my 2nd finger here to play the 5th fret of the A string, the 1st string. And the reason I've used my 2nd finger and not my ring finger is because I've then got to reach to the 6th fret, and that involves using my little finger. You can do that, but it's not a big stretch, and it's probably easier to do sticking to your first 3 fingers. 4th to 5th slide, then the top string, 3, 5, 6. That's the going up bit. And then we do just like before. We start coming down, 5th fret, 3rd fret, then the second finger does that slide again, 4th to 5th, and our index finger back on that 3rd fret of the 1st string. So we have this. Let's do a close-up. I'll do it without the F chord at the beginning to start off with, just so you can see where my finger is. And with the F chord, now there's a lot going on there, particularly if you're putting the chords in, so don't be afraid to slow this right down. So I'm going to play my C chord and then my F chord. To my C. And get used to going back and forth between those. Now in a real world situation you might play these more than once before changing chord. This pattern actually lasts 2 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So in a typical 12-bar blues we would have 4 bars of C, 2 bars of F, 2 bars of C. But because this pattern lasts 2 bars, that would mean playing, instead of 4 bars of C, we'd play this pattern twice. That would fill up 4 bars of C. The F we need to play for 2 bars, so we would play this pattern once because it fills up 2 bars. Back to C again and once through the pattern for another 2 bars. So the first 2/3 of a 12-bar blues could sound like this. F, C. So all we need now is the same riff but over a G7 chord, and then we can play a 12-bar blues if we like, or any other kind of 3-chord rock and roll boogie woogie kind of pattern that uses these 3 chords. Here's the pattern for G7. It will look very, very familiar. It's exactly the same as the pattern for F, and remember we actually made that F into an F7, so that was a little riff for a 7th chord. So we can use the same pattern over the G7, just 2 frets higher, because F up 1 fret becomes F sharp, up another fret becomes G. So instead of doing it here, starting on the 4th fret of my E string with my 2nd finger, I just move everything up 2 frets. So I start on the 6th fret with my 2nd finger and do exactly the same moves. So let me do a close-up on that. Now if you weren't going to play the G7 chord at the beginning of this, the first note of the riff is actually your open G string if you've got a high G. And if you are putting the G7 chord at the beginning, just strum the G7 chord. Then you've got to slide right up the neck to the 6th fret with your 2nd finger. Play the 6th, slide to the 7. Then your index finger comes down on the 5th fret, and then I'm going to use my 2nd finger on the 7th fret, and my ring finger can come in on the 8th. Then back down again. Then my little slide from 6 to 7 with my 2nd finger, and back to my index finger here. Nice and slowly. The important thing to remember about this one is that even though we're changing chords and the notes are different, the pattern that we're playing is almost identical every time. Sometimes we're going for a different note at the top to make a 7th chord, but the rhythm of how those notes work together is the same. Let's have one last playthrough that you can play along with nice and slowly. And if you want a longer backing to practice over, there's a little thing popping up in the corner of the screen now which will lead you to one of my videos, which is a 12-bar blues in C, and you can use this technique to play along with that. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the F. Back to C. G7. C. Now U. C. G7. Back to C. It's really good fun when you're playing on your own, or if you're in a group, particularly if you're in a group and you're trying to make your playing together sound more like an arrangement rather than everybody strumming the same things. It's really great fun to have a few of the people in the group playing a nice little riff like that while the others strum the chords. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.